The Secret Society. Chapter 1. The Manuscript Puzzle. Under the dim, vaulted ceiling of an ancient library in Rome, a man in his mid-50s, tall with graying hair, carefully handled an old manuscript. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the yellowed pages. He was Dr. Leonard Moretti, a respected professor of history, specializing in secret societies. For over 30 years, Moretti had dedicated his life to the study of esoteric orders and clandestine cults, but nothing had prepared him for what he had just discovered. The manuscript, dated to the 16th century, was a rare and valuable find, an obscure text written in a forgotten cipher. Its leather cover, worn and cracked with age, bore no title, but the symbol etched into it was unmistakable, a double-headed eagle, a symbol often associated with ancient secret societies. Moretti had come across the manuscript by sheer chance. A colleague from the University of Florence had mentioned an estate auction where this curious artifact had been overlooked by most bidders. Intrigued, Moretti had sent an assistant to purchase it, and now, weeks later, he sat alone in the darkened room, deciphering its contents. As he deciphered the first few lines, his breath caught in his throat. The text referred to a society he had only encountered in myths and unsubstantiated rumors, the Order of the Sacred Watch. According to legend, this order had been founded centuries ago by a group of enlightened individuals, dedicated to protecting a secret that could alter the course of human history. The manuscript hinted at a hidden treasure, something so powerful that it had been buried away to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Moretti's pulse quickened as he continued to read, each line revealing more of the puzzle. The manuscript contained a map, cryptic, fragmented, and hidden within layers of coded text. But what truly stunned him was the final line on the page, a phrase that seemed to be addressed to him directly. "The guardian of the secret is closer than you think." Moretti stared at the words, his mind racing. What did it mean? Had someone known he would find this manuscript? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He was alone in the library, but suddenly, the shadows seemed to shift, and the silence felt oppressive. He quickly copied the cryptic passage into his notebook, careful not to leave any detail behind. If the manuscript was genuine, then he had just stumbled upon the key to one of the greatest mysteries of all time, a secret guarded by generations of a hidden society. As he stood to leave, the lights in the library flickered. For a brief moment, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, Moretti's heart skipped a beat. Standing at the entrance to the library was a figure, cloaked in shadows, watching him. "Who are you?" Moretti demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his veins. The figure stepped forward, revealing a young woman with piercing green eyes. She wore a simple black coat, but her presence was anything but ordinary. "My name is Isabella," she said calmly, "and if you value your life, you will come with me now." Before Moretti could react, Isabella turned on her heel and walked towards the exit. Moretti hesitated only for a second before grabbing the manuscript and following her. Whatever she knew, he needed to find out. As they exited the library, the cold night air hit Moretti's face, bringing with it a sense of impending danger. He didn't know who Isabella was or what she wanted, but he had the unsettling feeling that his life had just taken a turn from which there would be no return. Chapter 2. The Hidden Society. The drive through the streets of Rome was tense. Moretti sat in the passenger seat of a black sedan, gripping the manuscript tightly, while Isabella drove with a calm determination that belied the urgency of the situation. They weaved through narrow alleys and ancient avenues, the city's historic landmarks passing by in a blur. "Where are you taking me?" Moretti finally asked, unable to suppress his curiosity any longer. "To someone who can help you," Isabella replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You've uncovered something dangerous, Dr. Moretti. The Order of the Sacred Watch is not just a myth. It's real, and there are people who would kill to keep its secrets hidden." Moretti's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. He had always suspected that some of the stories about secret societies had a basis in truth, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, skepticism creeping into his voice. The car suddenly veered off the main road, entering a secluded area lined with tall cypress trees. They approached a large, unmarked gate, which swung open as they neared. Isabella drove through without hesitation, and the gate closed silently behind them. The car stopped in front of an imposing villa, its facade a blend of Renaissance architecture and modern security. Moretti stepped out, feeling a mix of awe and apprehension. The villa was isolated, hidden away from prying eyes, an ideal place for a clandestine meeting. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The interior of the villa was elegant, filled with antique furniture and ornate tapestries. As they entered the main hall, a man in his late 60s, with a commanding presence and a sharp gaze, approached them. He was impeccably dressed, exuding an air of authority. "Dr. Moretti, I presume?" the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Alessandro De Luca. Welcome." Moretti shook his hand, noticing the firm grip. "What is this place? And why have I been brought here?" "This," De Luca said, gesturing around, "is a sanctuary for those who seek the truth about the world's hidden powers. We are a small group of scholars, historians, and truth seekers, much like yourself. We call ourselves the Conclave." "The Conclave?" Moretti repeated, intrigued. "Yes," De Luca confirmed. "We've been monitoring the activities of the Order of the Sacred Watch for years. But until now, we lacked the key to unravel their greatest secret. The manuscript you've found may be that key." Isabella stepped forward, addressing De Luca. "He's already begun deciphering it. But there's something else, a message that seemed to be directed at him specifically." De Luca's eyes narrowed. "A message? What did it say?" Moretti pulled out his notebook and read the line aloud. "The guardian of the secret is closer than you think." De Luca exchanged a glance with Isabella, his expression grave. "This is more serious than we thought. The Order may already know you have the manuscript." Moretti felt a chill run down his spine. "What do they want? What are they protecting?" De Luca hesitated, then motioned for Moretti to follow him deeper into the villa. They entered a dimly lit room, where a large map of the world covered one wall. Pins and markings dotted various locations, forming a complex web of connections. The Order of the Sacred Watch was founded to guard a relic of immense power, De Luca explained. A relic that could change the course of history if it fell into the wrong hands. Over the centuries, they've hidden it, moving it from place to place, ensuring that only the highest members of their society know its true location. Moretti stared at the map, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was hearing. "And now I've stumbled onto their trail?" "Yes," De Luca said, "and that puts you in grave danger. The Order will stop at nothing to protect their secret, but with our help, you might just have a chance to uncover the truth and survive." Moretti looked at the map again, then back at De Luca and Isabella. He had no choice now, he was in too deep. Whatever the Order was hiding, it was something worth killing for, and that meant it was something worth finding. "Where do we start?" Moretti asked, his voice resolute. De Luca nodded approvingly. "First, we need to decipher the rest of the manuscript. Every clue could lead us closer to the relic. Time is not on our side." As they began to pore over the manuscript together, Moretti couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Order of the Sacred Watch was out there, and they wouldn't let anyone uncover their secret without a fight. Chapter 3. The Cryptic Clue. The hours passed in a blur of ancient symbols, faded ink, and intense concentration. Moretti, De Luca, and Isabella worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragmented codes within the manuscript. The room was filled with the soft rustle of parchment and the occasional murmur as they deciphered each new line. "This part here," Moretti said, pointing to a section of the manuscript. "It mentions an Eye of Providence, a symbol often associated with divine protection and enlightenment. But it's also linked to several secret societies." De Luca nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. The Eye of Providence has been used by various groups throughout history. But in this context, it could refer to something more specific, perhaps a location or an artifact connected to the order. Isabella, who had been silently studying a different section, suddenly spoke up. "Look at this." The text describes a series. Moretti leaned over to examine the passage she had found. The script was difficult to read, but the message was clear. Whatever they were searching for was protected by layers of deception and hidden dangers. It wasn't just a matter of finding the relic, they had to be worthy of it. The Eye of Providence, Moretti mused, his mind racing. Could it be a metaphor? Perhaps it's guiding us to something hidden in plain sight, something that only those who understand its true meaning can uncover. De Luca's eyes lit up with realization. Or it could be a location marked by the symbol itself. Many ancient sites incorporate the Eye of Providence into their architecture. But which site? Isabella asked, her voice tinged with urgency. There are countless possibilities across Europe alone. Moretti paced the room, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. The manuscript is leading us somewhere, but it's testing us first. If we follow the clues, they'll take us to the relic, but we need to think like the members of the order, see the world as they did. Isabella stood, her eyes locked on Moretti. There's one place that comes to mind. A place where the Eye of Providence is more than just a symbol. It's a key. Moretti and De Luca turned to her, anticipation building. The Pantheon in Rome, she said, her voice filled with certainty. The oculus at the center of the dome, it's been called the Eye of the Gods. It's a place of enlightenment, where light and shadow play tricks on the mind. If the manuscript is pointing us to a location, the Pantheon could be it. Moretti felt a thrill of excitement. The Pantheon, a temple with a history steeped in mystery and ancient rites. It made sense. The order could have chosen it as a hiding place for their secret, a place that symbolized the merging of divine and human understanding. We need to go there, Moretti said, his voice decisive. If the Pantheon holds the next clue, we can't afford to waste any time. De Luca nodded in agreement. But we must be cautious. The order may already know we're on their trail. They could be watching, waiting for us to make a move. Isabella was already gathering her things. Then we'll have to stay one step ahead. Let's go before they have a chance to stop us. As they prepared to leave the villa, Moretti couldn't shake the feeling that they were venturing into dangerous territory. The Pantheon was a place of great significance, both historically and symbolically. If the order had chosen it as a hiding place, they wouldn't have done so lightly. The drive to the Pantheon was filled with tense silence. The streets of Rome were quieter now, the city bathed in the golden glow of early morning. As they approached the ancient temple, its imposing columns and massive dome came into view, a reminder of the enduring power of history and myth. Moretti, De Luca, and Isabella stood at the entrance, gazing up at the structure. The Pantheon had stood for nearly 2 millennia, a testament to Roman engineering and architectural brilliance. But today, it was more than just a monument. It was a gateway to the unknown. As they stepped inside, the cool air of the interior washed over them. The oculus at the center of the dome allowed a single beam of light to pierce the darkness, illuminating the space in a way that seemed almost otherworldly. Moretti's eyes scanned the walls, searching for any sign of the Eye of Providence. But the Pantheon was vast, and the tasks seemed daunting. "It's here somewhere," Isabella whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "We just need to find it." De Luca began examining the floor, looking for any symbols or markings that could lead them to the next clue. Moretti, meanwhile, focused on the oculus, its circular form mesmerizing in its simplicity. The light it cast seemed to shift as the sun moved, creating patterns on the floor that changed with the passing of time. "The light," Moretti murmured to himself. "It's all about the light." He moved to the center of the room, positioning himself directly beneath the oculus. As the beam of light struck the ground, he noticed something, an inscription barely visible in the dim illumination. "Here," he called out, beckoning the others. "There's something engraved in the stone." Isabella and De Luca rushed over, and together they crouched to examine the inscription. The words were in Latin, an ancient phrase that sent a chill down Moretti's spine. Lux est revelatio Dei. Inside the compartment was an ancient key, intricately designed with the symbol of the Eye of Providence engraved on its head. "This is it," Moretti whispered. "The next piece of the puzzle." But as he held the key in his hand, a sudden sound echoed through the Pantheon, a door creaking open, followed by the heavy footsteps of someone entering the temple. "We're not alone," Isabella hissed, her hand reaching for a hidden weapon. "We need to get out of here. Now." Moretti clutched the key tightly as they made a hasty exit. The Pantheon had given them their next clue, but it had also attracted the attention of someone who might not be on their side. Chapter 4. Shadows in Rome. The sun was rising as they emerged from the Pantheon, the first rays of dawn casting long shadows across the square. Moretti's heart was pounding, the adrenaline from their discovery still coursing through his veins. Isabella led the way, her pace quickening as they moved away from the ancient temple. "We need to find cover," she said, her voice low but urgent. "The Order could have operatives nearby. They won't let us walk away with that key." De Luca glanced over his shoulder, scanning the empty streets for any sign of pursuit. "We can't stay out in the open. We should head back to the villa. It's the safest place to regroup." Moretti nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. They had found a crucial piece of the puzzle, but with it came an increased risk. The Order of the Sacred Watch would not take kindly to their interference. They moved swiftly through the winding streets of Rome, staying in the shadows and avoiding the main thoroughfares. The city, normally bustling with activity, was eerily quiet at this early hour. It was as if Rome itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. As they turned down a narrow alley, Isabella suddenly stopped, her body tensing. "Wait," she whispered, holding up a hand to signal them to halt. Moretti and De Luca froze, listening intently. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the alley, steady, purposeful, and getting closer. "Someone's following us," De Luca said, his voice barely above a whisper. Isabella motioned for them to back up, retreating into the shadows of a nearby doorway. They pressed themselves against the cold stone, hearts pounding as the footsteps grew louder. A figure appeared at the far end of the alley, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The man was tall, dressed in a dark suit, with an air of authority that sent a chill down Moretti's spine. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning the alley as if searching for something or someone. Isabella's hand slipped inside her coat, fingers curling around the hilt of a concealed blade. Moretti could feel the tension radiating from her, a coiled spring ready to snap. The man stopped, his gaze locking onto the doorway where they were hiding. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, pressing a button that emitted a soft beep. Moretti's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. The device was a tracker, and it had just picked up a signal, most likely from the key he was carrying. "They know we're here," Moretti whispered urgently. "We need to move." Isabella didn't hesitate. She sprang from the doorway, her blade flashing in the dim light as she moved to intercept the man. He reacted with lightning speed, dodging her strike and pulling out a weapon of his own, a sleek, black pistol. De Luca grabbed Moretti's arm, pulling him further into the alley. "This way," he urged, leading him down a side path that twisted and turned, creating a labyrinthine escape route. As they ran, Moretti could hear the sounds of a struggle behind them. Footsteps, grunts, the clatter of metal on stone. Isabella was holding her own, but they couldn't afford to wait for her. "Isabella will catch up," De Luca said, as if reading Moretti's thoughts. "We need to get that key to safety." They emerged from the alley onto a quiet street, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Moretti's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. The man in the alley, he was no ordinary pursuer. He moved with the precision of a trained operative, someone who had been sent to retrieve the key at all costs. "This isn't just about the relic," Moretti said, his voice hoarse. "The Order knows we're getting close. Get in," she ordered, motioning to the back seat. Moretti and DeLuca didn't hesitate. They scrambled into the car, and Isabella hit the gas, speeding away from the scene. "What happened back there?" Moretti asked, still shaken. Isabella's eyes were hard as she kept her focus on the road. "That man was one of the Order's enforcers. He wasn't there to negotiate, he was there to kill us." Moretti's blood ran cold. The stakes had just been raised, and the key in his pocket felt like a ticking time bomb. "Where do we go now?" DeLuca asked, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. Isabella's expression was resolute. "We take the fight to them. We find the relic before they do, and we uncover the truth. But we'll need to be smart, and we'll need allies." Moretti nodded, determination hardening his resolve. The Order of the Sacred Watch had protected their secret for centuries, but now the race was on. Whoever found the relic first would hold the power to change the world, or destroy it. As they sped through the ancient streets of Rome, the city's shadows seemed to grow darker, closing in around them. The Order was out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Moretti knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't give up. Not until the truth was brought to light, and the relic was finally revealed. Chapter 5. The Vault of Secrets. The sun was high in the sky when they reached their destination, a nondescript building tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Rome. From the outside, it appeared to be just another residential property, but Moretti sensed there was more to it. Isabella parked the car in the driveway, her expression serious. "This is one of our safe houses," she explained as they exited the vehicle. "It's off the grid, no records, no surveillance. We'll be safe here for the time being." Moretti followed Isabella and DeLuca inside, the door closing with a heavy thud behind them. The interior was sparse, functional, with only the bare essentials: a few chairs, a table, and some basic supplies. But as they moved further into the building, Moretti noticed something unusual. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with ancient texts, scrolls, and artifacts from various cultures. "This is more than just a safe house," Moretti remarked, running his fingers along the spines of the old books. "It's a library, a repository of knowledge." DeLuca nodded, his expression one of pride. "The Conclave has been collecting these for decades, maybe even centuries. We believe that the key to understanding the past and the future lies in these texts. Many of them contain information about secret societies, including the Order of the Sacred Watch." Isabella led them to a large table in the center of the room, where she spread out a map of Rome. "We need to figure out where the key leads. The Pantheon was just the beginning. There's more to this puzzle, and we're running out of time." Moretti pulled the ancient key from his pocket, laying it carefully on the table. The intricate design glinted in the dim light, the eye of Providence etched into its surface seeming to watch them as they worked. The inscription at the Pantheon mentioned light as the revelation. Isabella's expression was determined. "I have a contact inside the Vatican, someone who owes me a favor. They might be able to get us in, but we'll need to move quickly. The Order could already be watching us." Moretti's heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. They were on the brink of something monumental, an opportunity to uncover a secret that had been buried for centuries. But the risks were equally great. The Order of the Sacred Watch would stop at nothing to protect their secret, and Moretti knew that they were now racing against time. "Let's do it," Moretti said, his voice firm. "We've come this far and we can't turn back now. We need to get into the Vatican and find out what the key unlocks." Isabella nodded, already reaching for her phone to contact her Vatican insider. "We'll make the arrangements. But once we're inside, we'll be on our own. We can't rely on anyone else for help." DeLuca placed a reassuring hand on Moretti's shoulder. "We're in this together, Leonard. Whatever happens, we'll face it as a team. Moretti felt a surge of gratitude for his companions. They had become more than just allies in this quest. They were his friends, bound by a shared mission and the dangers that came with it. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Moretti couldn't help but think about the stakes. The key in his pocket was more than just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of power, knowledge, and the potential to change the course of history. What lay ahead in the Vatican Library was a mystery, but Moretti knew one thing for certain. They were about to uncover a secret that could shake the foundations of the world. Chapter 6. The Vatican Library. The night was clear and quiet as they approached the Vatican. The grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica loomed in the distance, its massive dome glowing softly against the dark sky. The sight was breathtaking, but Moretti's focus was on the mission ahead. Isabella had arranged for a discreet entrance into the Vatican Library, bypassing the usual security checks and protocols. "This way," Isabella whispered, leading them through a narrow side entrance guarded by a single, discreet figure. The man nodded at Isabella, his expression stern, but he made no move to stop them as they slipped into the shadows of the Vatican complex. The interior of the Vatican was a maze of corridors and chambers, each more ornate than the last. The atmosphere was heavy with history, every corner filled with relics and art that spoke of centuries of faith and power. But Moretti felt none of the reverence he might have felt under different circumstances. His mind was focused solely on the task at hand. They moved quickly, avoiding the few guards on duty at this late hour. Isabella's contact had provided them with a map of the library's layout, highlighting the most secure areas where their target might be hidden. As they navigated the labyrinth of corridors, Moretti couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Finally, they reached a large, ornate door marked with intricate carvings and symbols that Moretti recognized from his studies, symbols of knowledge, wisdom, and divine protection. The Vatican Library was on the other side of this door, its secrets guarded by layers of history and faith. Isabella approached the door and produced a small, ancient-looking key from her pocket. "This will get us in," she said, inserting the key into the lock. The door opened with a soft click, revealing the dimly lit interior of the library. Moretti's breath caught as they stepped inside. The Vatican Library was unlike any place he had ever seen. Row upon row of ancient books, scrolls, and manuscripts filled the massive space, each one a treasure trove of knowledge. The air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and leather, and the silence was almost tangible. "This way," Isabella whispered, leading them deeper into the library. They passed through several rooms, each filled with priceless works that had been preserved for centuries. But their destination was a specific chamber, a place where only the most restricted texts were kept, hidden away from the world. As they approached a heavily secured door, Isabella turned to Moretti. "This is it. If the Order's relic is here, it will be behind this door." Moretti felt a surge of anticipation. The key he carried might be the final piece of the puzzle, a key that could unlock the secrets of the Order of the Sacred Watch. But as he reached for the door, a sudden noise made them all freeze. Footsteps echoed through the library, approaching rapidly. Someone else was here, and they were getting closer. "Quickly," Isabella hissed, pulling Moretti towards the door. "We don't have much time." Moretti inserted the ancient key into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened, and panic gripped him. But then, with a soft click, the lock disengaged, and the door swung open. Inside, the chamber was dark, illuminated only by the faint light from the corridor. But as they stepped in, Moretti's eyes adjusted to the dimness, revealing a room filled with ancient artifacts, scrolls, and a single, imposing chest in the center. "That must be it," De Luca whispered, pointing to the chest. "The relic." Moretti approached the chest cautiously, his heart pounding. The chest was old, its surface adorned with the same symbol of the Eye of Providence. He reached out, his hand trembling, and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was an object wrapped in cloth. Moretti carefully unwrapped it, revealing a small, intricately carved box made of dark wood. The box was sealed, with no obvious way to open it. "What is it?" De Luca asked, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Moretti admitted, "but it's something important, something the Order has been protecting for centuries." Before they could examine the box further, the sound of footsteps grew louder, followed by voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The Order's operatives had found them. "We need to go now," Isabella urged, her voice tense. Moretti quickly wrapped the box and placed it back in the chest, securing the lid. They couldn't take it with them, it was too large and too risky. But the knowledge of its existence was enough for now. They had uncovered something, but the mystery was far from solved. As they exited the chamber, the voices grew louder, closer. They hurried back through the library, retracing their steps with as much speed and silence as they could muster. The Vatican's vast corridors seemed to stretch on endlessly, and Moretti's heart raced with the fear of being caught. Finally, they reached the side entrance where they had entered. Isabella's contact was waiting, a look of concern on his face as he held the door open for them. "Hurry," he urged, ushering them out into the night. They slipped back into the darkness of the Vatican's exterior, the cool night air hitting them like a shock. Moretti's mind was racing, filled with questions about the box and the secrets it held. As they made their way back to the car, Moretti glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see their pursuers emerging from the shadows. But the Vatican remained silent, its secrets still hidden within its ancient walls. "We did it," De Luca said as they climbed into the car, his voice filled with relief. Moretti nodded, though his thoughts were far from at ease. They had uncovered a piece of the puzzle, but the true nature of the relic remained a mystery. The Order of the Sacred Watch would not stop hunting them, and the box they had found was only the beginning. As they sped away from the Vatican, Moretti couldn't help but feel that they had set something in motion, something that would have consequences far beyond their understanding. The relic, the Order, the secrets of the past, they were all intertwined in a web of history and power that was about to unravel. But one thing was certain, they were no longer just seekers of knowledge. They were now the keepers of a secret that could change the world. Chapter 7. The Revelation. The journey back to the villa was filled with tense silence. Each of them was lost in thought, their minds grappling with the enormity of what they had just uncovered. The Vatican Library had revealed one of its most guarded secrets, but the true nature of the relic remained elusive, shrouded in mystery. As they pulled into the driveway of the villa, Moretti felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The adrenaline that had fueled him during their mission was fading, leaving behind a deep weariness. But there was no time to rest, not yet. They had to figure out what the box contained, and what the Order of the Sacred Watch had been protecting for centuries. Inside the villa, Isabella immediately began securing the perimeter, ensuring that they hadn't been followed. De Luca set up a makeshift workstation, spreading out maps, notes, and the documents they had collected. Moretti placed the small, intricately carved box on the table, its dark wood gleaming under the soft light of the room. "This is it," Moretti said quietly, his eyes fixed on the box. "The key to everything we've been searching for." Isabella joined them at the table, her expression determined. "We need to open it. Whatever is inside, it's the reason the Order has been hunting us." Moretti nodded, his fingers tracing the delicate carvings on the box's surface. The craftsmanship was exquisite, and he could sense the weight of history in every detail. But there was no visible lock or hinge, no obvious way to open it. "Let me see," De Luca said, leaning in to examine the box. He carefully ran his fingers over the wood, searching for any hidden mechanism. After a few moments, his fingers paused over a small, almost imperceptible indentation. "There's something here," De Luca murmured, pressing gently. The box emitted a soft click, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside the compartment was a rolled-up parchment, tied with a delicate ribbon. Moretti's heart raced as he carefully removed the parchment and untied the ribbon, unrolling it with trembling hands. The The parchment was old, the edges frayed with age, but the writing was still legible. The text was in Latin, and as Moretti read the words, his eyes widened in shock. This can't be," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What is it?" Isabella asked, her voice tense with anticipation. Moretti looked up at them, his face pale. "It's a map to the location of the true relic. But that's not all. The text describes the relic as something more than just an artifact. It's a key to knowledge, ancient knowledge that has been lost for millennia. Knowledge that could change the world." De Luca's eyes widened. "A key to knowledge? What kind of knowledge?" Moretti shook his head, still trying to comprehend the enormity of what he was reading. "It's not clear, but the text refers to it as the light of the ancients. It suggests that this relic holds the secrets of a civilization that predates all known history, a civilization that possessed advanced technology and understanding of the universe." Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. "And the Order has been guarding this secret for centuries, hiding it from the world." Moretti nodded. "Yes. The Order of the Sacred Watch was founded to protect this knowledge, to ensure that it didn't fall into the wrong hands. But now we have the map, the key to finding it." De Luca's mind was racing. If this knowledge is as powerful as the text suggests, it could change everything: science, religion, history. It could reshape our understanding of the world. "But it could also be dangerous," Isabella interjected, her tone grave. "The Order has been willing to kill to keep this secret. There's a reason they've hidden it for so long." Moretti felt a deep sense of responsibility settling over him. They had uncovered something that could alter the course of human history, but the implications were terrifying. The knowledge contained in the relic could be a blessing or a curse. "We need to find the relic," Moretti said, his voice filled with determination. "But we have to be careful. If the Order finds out that we have the map, they'll come after us with everything they have." Isabella nodded. "We need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more time the Order has to track us down." De Luca spread the map out on the table, studying the details. The markings indicated a location deep within the mountains of northern Italy, a place that had been forgotten by time. "This is where we need to go," De Luca said, pointing to the map. "It's remote, isolated, a perfect place to hide something of immense importance." Moretti's heart raced with anticipation. They were on the brink of something monumental, but the dangers were greater than ever. The Order of the Sacred Watch would stop at nothing to protect their secret, and Moretti knew that the road ahead would be perilous. But there was no turning back. They had come too far, uncovered too much. The truth was within their reach, and they had to see it through to the end. As they prepared for the journey to the mountains, Moretti felt a sense of resolve harden within him. The relic, whatever it was, held the key to a secret that had been hidden for centuries. And now, they were the only ones who could bring it to light. But the shadows of the past were long, and the Order of the Sacred Watch would not let their secret go without a fight. The final confrontation was coming, and Moretti knew that they would have to face their greatest challenge yet. As they set out into the night, the weight of history pressed down upon them. The relic was out there, waiting to be found, and with it, the power to change the world forever. The end. The Girl on the Edge. Chapter 1. The View from the Cliffs. The cliffs loomed high above the restless sea, jagged and raw, with the waves crashing violently against the rocks below. To those who dared approach the edge, the drop was dizzying, a plunge into the unknown. There was something hauntingly beautiful about the cliffs, a place where the world seemed to end and all that was left was the void. Lucy stood at the edge, her toes peeking over the precipice. The wind whipped through her hair, tangling it into a wild mess. She wasn't afraid of the height, nor the possibility of falling. In fact, she found a strange comfort in it. The cliffs were her escape, the one place where she could think clearly, away from the suffocating pressure of her life in the village below. The village was small, quaint even, with its cobbled streets and whitewashed cottages. But to Lucy, it was a cage. The people there knew too much, or at least they thought they did. Everyone had a story about her, about what had happened the night Alex disappeared. She could hear the whispers whenever she passed, see the accusing looks cast in her direction. "That's the girl who was with him that night," they'd say, their voices dripping with suspicion. "She knows more than she's letting on." But Lucy had no answers for them, just as she had none for herself. That night was a blur, fragmented memories that didn't quite fit together. She remembered the argument, the coldness in Alex's eyes, the way his hand had gripped her arm too tightly. But after that, nothing. Just a black void. And now Alex was gone. The police had searched everywhere. His house, the woods, even the cliffs, but there was no trace of him. No body, no belongings, just the cold emptiness of his absence. Lucy took a deep breath, the salty sea air filling her lungs. The cliffs were a refuge, but they also held secrets. She had a vague, unsettling feeling that something was hidden here, something important. But what? The sound of footsteps behind her made her spin around, heart pounding. She hadn't heard anyone approach, but there he was, standing just a few feet away. "Jake," she said, more a statement than a question. He gave her a half-smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I thought I might find you here." Jake had been Alex's best friend, inseparable since childhood. Now, he was the only person in the village who didn't seem to judge her, who didn't look at her like she was a monster. But there was something different about him today, an intensity in his gaze that unsettled her. "Why are you here?" Lucy asked, her voice shaky. He shrugged, his eyes never leaving hers. "Just thought we could talk. About Alex." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she wasn't ready for it. "Not yet. There's nothing to talk about," she said quickly, turning back towards the sea. Jake took a step closer, his voice low. "I think there is. You were the last person to see him, Lucy. You have to remember something." Lucy squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out his words. "I told the police everything I know. But what if there's something you missed? Something important?" His voice was insistent now, almost desperate. She opened her eyes, staring out at the horizon. The waves seemed to mock her, relentless in their assault on the cliffs. "I don't know, Jake. I don't know what happened to him." Jake was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost a whisper. "What if you did something, Lucy? Something you don't remember?" She felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The thought had crossed her mind before, in the darkest hours of the night when sleep refused to come. But hearing it aloud, from Jake's lips, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "No," she said, shaking her head violently. "I couldn't have." "Are you sure?" he interrupted, his tone sharp. "Memory can be tricky. Maybe you blocked it out." Lucy felt tears sting her eyes. "Stop it, Jake. Just stop." But he didn't. "You need to think, Lucy, before it's too late." She turned to face him, anger and fear swirling in her chest. Too late for what? Jake's expression was unreadable. For the truth to come out. Chapter 2. The missing piece. The walk back to the village was suffocating. The narrow path through the woods seemed to close in on Lucy, the trees pressing in on all sides, their branches gnarled and twisted like grasping hands. Jake walked beside her, silent now, but his words echoed in her mind. "What if you did something, Lucy? Something you don't remember?" She couldn't shake the thought as much as she tried. The idea that she might have hurt Alex, that she might be responsible for his disappearance, gnawed at her insides like a disease. But it didn't make sense. She wasn't a violent person. She had never even raised her voice in anger before that night. And yet, the blank spots in her memory terrified her. As they reached the edge of the woods, the village came into view. It looked peaceful, almost picturesque, with its old stone houses and tidy gardens. But to Lucy, it was filled with ghosts. Every corner held a memory of Alex, Every face was a reminder of the questions she couldn't answer. Jake paused at the edge of the path, looking at her with a strange expression. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice unusually gentle. Lucy nodded, but she knew he didn't believe her. How could he? She didn't even believe herself. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Jake didn't press the issue, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. "If you remember anything at all, you'll tell me, right?" "Of course," she replied automatically, though she wasn't sure if it was true. They walked in silence for a few more minutes, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Lucy's thoughts were a jumble of confusion and fear. What had happened that night? Why couldn't she remember? As they approached the center of the village, the familiar sight of the old stone church came into view. It was a place of solace for many, but for Lucy, it was just another reminder of everything she had lost. She paused, her eyes drawn to the small cemetery beside the church. The gravestones were worn and weathered, some so old that the names were no longer legible. "I'm going to head home," Jake said suddenly, breaking the silence. "But if you need to talk, you know where to find me." Lucy nodded, barely registering his words. Her mind was elsewhere, drawn to the cemetery as if by some unseen force. She watched as Jake walked away, his figure growing smaller in the distance until he disappeared from view. The churchyard was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Lucy found herself drawn to a particular gravestone, one she hadn't noticed before. It was newer than the others, the stone still sharp and clean. The name engraved on it sent a shiver down her spine. Alex Marshall. She stumbled back, her heart racing. It couldn't be. There was no body, no evidence that Alex was dead. So why was there a gravestone with his name on it? Lucy's mind whirled as she tried to make sense of it. Had the villagers given up hope of finding him alive? Or was there something more sinister at play? She knelt down, her fingers tracing the letters carved into the stone. As she did, she noticed something odd. A small, almost imperceptible crack running along the base of the gravestone. She peered closer, her breath catching in her throat. The crack was widening, as if the stone was splitting apart from the inside. And then, with a soft pop, a small, folded piece of paper slipped out from the crack, landing on the ground at her feet. Lucy stared at it, her mind racing. What was this? A note? A clue? She hesitated for a moment before reaching down to pick it up. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper, revealing a single, hastily scrawled sentence. "You're not alone." Her heart pounded in her chest as she read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. What did it mean? Who had written it? And why had they hidden it here, of all places? A sudden noise behind her made her jump, and she spun around, half expecting to see someone standing there. But the cemetery was empty, the shadows long and deep in the fading light. Lucy clutched the note tightly, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this a message from Alex? Or was it something else entirely? The questions swirled in her head, but there were no answers. Only the overwhelming sense that something was very, very wrong. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Shadows. The walk back to her cottage felt longer than usual, the note burning a hole in Lucy's pocket. Her mind raced with questions and fears, each step echoing with the weight of uncertainty. The village had taken on a darker tone, the familiar streets now shadowed with suspicion and doubt. The evening air was heavy, and the silence pressed in on her from all sides. As she approached her cottage, Lucy felt the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. She paused, glancing over her shoulder, but the street was empty. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, making her heart race faster. She hurried inside, closing the door behind her and locking it with trembling hands. The cottage was small, just one room with a kitchenette, a tiny living space, and a bed pushed up against the wall. It was cozy, a refuge from the outside world, but tonight it felt stifling, almost claustrophobic. Lucy pulled the note out of her pocket, staring at the words as if they might change under her gaze. "You're not alone." What did it mean? Was someone watching her? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't stay here, not with the feeling that someone might be outside, waiting. But where could she go? Jake had offered to listen, but she wasn't ready to involve him in this, not yet. There was only one place she could think of, a place where she might find some answers. The cliffs. Lucy grabbed her coat and left the cottage, moving quickly down the deserted street. The cliffs were about a 20-minute walk from the village, through the woods and up a steep, winding path. The moon was high in the sky now, casting an eerie light over the landscape. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, distorting the familiar into something dark and sinister. The wind picked up as she neared the cliffs, a cold gust that cut through her coat and chilled her to the bone. But she didn't slow down. The sense of urgency pressed her forward, driving her toward the edge. The cliffs were desolate, the sea crashing far below, but Lucy wasn't alone. A figure stood at the very edge, silhouetted against the night sky. She froze, fear gripping her chest. Who was it? Someone else? As if sensing her presence, the figure turned, and Lucy gasped. It wasn't Jake. It was someone she had never seen before, a tall man with dark, unruly hair and a rugged face. His eyes were sharp, piercing in a way that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. "You must be Lucy," he said, his voice deep and rough, like the sea. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The man took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Someone who knows what really happened to Alex." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Do you know where he is?" He nodded slowly. "I do. But it's not what you think." The wind howled around them, but Lucy barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the man in front of her. "Tell me," she urged, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking to the sea for a brief moment before returning to hers. "Alex isn't dead," he said finally. "But he's not safe either. And neither are you." Lucy felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. "What are you talking about? Where is he?" The man sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He's in hiding. There are people after him. Dangerous people. He didn't want to involve you, but it's too late for that now." Lucy's mind was reeling. None of this made any sense. Alex in hiding? Dangerous people? It sounded like something out of a movie, not her quiet, uneventful life. But the fear in the man's eyes was real, and it terrified her. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's expression hardened. "You don't want to know. But you need to leave this village, Lucy. You're not safe here. They'll come for you, just like they came for Alex." The weight of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. She couldn't just leave. Her entire life was here, everything she knew. But the look in the man's eyes told her she didn't have a choice. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, still grasping for something solid, something real. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, silver locket. He held it out to her, and Lucy's breath caught in her throat. It was Alex's. She would recognize it anywhere. She had given it to him on their anniversary. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took the locket, her fingers trembling. "Where is he?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The man's expression softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "He's safe for now. But if you stay here, neither of you will be for much longer." Lucy looked down at the locket, her heart aching with a mixture of relief and fear. Alex was alive. But how long would that last? When she looked up, the man was gone. The cliffs were empty, the wind whipping through the air, carrying with it the scent of salt and something darker, danger, perhaps. Lucy clutched the locket to her chest, her mind spinning with everything she had learned. She had to leave. But where could she go? And how could she find Alex before it was too late? The questions plagued her as she turned away from the cliffs, heading back toward the village. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. Chapter 4. Secrets in the dark. The cottage felt colder than ever when Lucy returned, the shadows inside seeming to stretch into every corner, as if they were hiding something. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart still pounding from the encounter at the cliffs. The locket was clutched tightly in her hand, a lifeline to the truth she desperately needed to uncover. But where could she go? The man's warning echoed in her mind. She wasn't safe in the village, and neither was Alex. But the idea of leaving everything behind, of running with no clear destination, terrified her. She had no one to turn to, no one she could trust. His name flashed through her mind, and she hesitated. He had been Alex's best friend, and despite his earlier suspicions, he had always been there for her. But could she really trust him with this? With her life? She couldn't stay here, that much was clear. But if she was going to leave, she needed help. And Jake was the only person who might be willing to give it. Lucy grabbed her phone and dialed his number, her fingers trembling as she pressed the buttons. The phone rang twice before he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Lucy?" he asked, the sound of her name heavy with concern. "What's going on?" "I need to see you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's urgent." There was a pause on the other end, and she could hear him moving, likely sitting up in bed. "Where are you?" "At home. But I need to leave the village, Jake. Tonight." She heard him take a sharp breath. "But what happened?" "I'll explain when you get here," she said quickly. "Just hurry." Jake didn't argue. "I'm on my way." Lucy hung up and shoved the phone into her pocket, her mind racing. She grabbed a small backpack and began stuffing it with essentials, clothes, toiletries, the little bit of money she had saved up. Her hands moved quickly, driven by a rising sense of panic. She had no idea where they would go, but anywhere had to be safer than here. The knock on her door made her jump, and she froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Had Jake really gotten here that quickly? Or was it someone else? She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Relief flooded through her when she saw Jake standing on the other side, his expression tense and worried. She unlocked the door and opened it, pulling him inside. "What's going on, Lucy?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her face for answers. She closed the door behind him, locking it again before speaking. "I talked to someone, at the cliffs. He said Alex is alive, but we're both in danger." Jake's eyes widened, and he reached out to steady her. "What? Who did you talk to?" "I don't know who he was," she admitted, her voice shaking. "But he knew things, Jake. He knew about Alex, and he gave me this." She held out the locket, watching as recognition flickered in Jake's eyes. "That's Alex's," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "He really is alive?" Lucy nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "But we have to leave, Jake. The man said we're not safe here. There are people after Alex, and they'll come for me too." Jake ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to process everything. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steadying. "We'll go. But we need a plan, Lucy. We can't just run blindly." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know what to do. I just know we have to get out of here." Jake took a deep breath, his expression resolute. "We'll figure it out. But first, we need to get out of the village. I have a car. Let's pack what we need and go. We can decide where to go once we're safe." Lucy nodded, feeling a small measure of relief at his determination. Jake was strong, reliable, someone she could count on. With him by her side, maybe they had a chance. They worked quickly, packing what little they could carry. Lucy kept the locket close, as if it might somehow guide her to Alex. Every noise outside made her jump, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. But they couldn't afford to wait. Once they were ready, Jake led the way out, keeping a careful watch as they made their way to his car parked a few streets over. The village was eerily quiet, the streets deserted, but the sense of danger was palpable. They both moved quickly, driven by the same instinct to get away. As they reached the car, Lucy felt a surge of hope. They were almost out, almost free. But as they climbed inside and Jake turned the key in the ignition, the engine roared to life, and in that same instant, A pair of headlights flashed on behind them, blinding in the darkness. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Someone was there, watching them, waiting. And now they had been found. Chapter 5. The Pursuit. The headlights behind them blazed like twin suns in the night, bathing the car's interior in harsh, white light. Lucy's breath caught in her throat as she looked over at Jake, her heart pounding with fear. His expression was grim, his jaw clenched tightly as he gripped the steering wheel. "Hold on," Jake muttered, his voice low and tense. Without waiting for a response, he slammed his foot down on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires screeching on the pavement as they sped down the narrow village street. The headlights behind them grew smaller, but they didn't disappear. The other car was following them, relentless in its pursuit. "Who is it?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling as she turned to look out the rear window. Jake didn't take his eyes off the road. "I don't know, but we can't let them catch us." The village houses blurred past as Jake navigated the winding streets, the car gaining speed with every turn. But the pursuing vehicle wasn't far behind, its engine roaring as it closed the distance. Lucy's mind raced, fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. Who were these people? And why were they after her and Jake? The man on the cliffs had warned her, but now the danger was all too real. The car skidded around a sharp corner, nearly losing control as Jake fought to keep it on the road. They were heading out of the village now, the open countryside stretching out before them. But the other car was still on their tail, its headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. "We need to lose them," Jake said through gritted teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel. "How?" Lucy asked, panic rising in her chest. "They're right behind us." Jake didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the car even harder, the engine straining as they sped down the narrow country road. The trees on either side whipped by in a blur, the road ahead barely visible in the darkness. Lucy glanced back again, her heart sinking as she saw the other car gaining on them. It was a black SUV, larger and more powerful than their own vehicle. There was no way they could outrun it for long. Just as she was about to voice her fears, Jake suddenly veered off the road, taking a sharp turn onto a narrow, dirt path. The car bounced and jolted as they raced through the trees, the headlights illuminating the rough terrain ahead. "What are you doing?" Lucy gasped, gripping the seat as they hit a particularly large bump. "Trying to lose them in the woods," Jake replied, his voice tight with concentration. "Hold on, it's going to get rough." The path was barely wide enough for the car, the trees pressing in on either side. Branches scraped against the windows, and the wheels skidded on the loose dirt, but Jake kept them moving forward. The SUV followed them onto the path, its headlights still glaring behind them, but it was struggling with the tight turns and narrow space. For a brief moment, Lucy dared to hope that they might actually escape. But that hope was shattered when the path suddenly ended in a clearing, the way forward blocked by a thick wall of trees. Jake slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. The SUV was only seconds behind, its headlights flooding the clearing with light. They were trapped. "Get out," Jake ordered, his voice urgent as he unbuckled his seatbelt. Lucy didn't need to be told twice. She fumbled with her own seatbelt, her hands shaking as she struggled to unclip it. Jake was already out of the car, running around to her side to help. He yanked open the door and pulled her out, his grip firm on her arm. "Run!" he shouted, dragging her toward the trees on the far side of the clearing. They sprinted into the woods, the darkness closing in around them. The sound of the SUV's doors slamming shut echoed through the night, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They were being chased, hunted like prey. Lucy's lungs burned as she ran, her legs aching with the effort. The trees were a blur around her, the ground uneven and treacherous. She stumbled several times, but Jake was always there, pulling her back to her feet and urging her on. The footsteps behind them grew louder, closer. Lucy risked a glance over her shoulder and saw two figures in the darkness, their faces obscured by shadows. They were gaining on them, relentless in their pursuit. "Jake!" she cried, her voice filled with panic. They're catching up. Jake's grip tightened on her arm, and he pulled her down a narrow path between the trees. The branches tore at her clothes and scratched her skin, but she barely felt it. All that mattered was escaping, getting away from the people who wanted to harm them. The path wound through the trees, twisting and turning in a disorienting maze. Lucy's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, Jake suddenly stopped, pulling her into a small, dark alcove formed by the roots of a massive tree. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for her to stay quiet. They crouched in the darkness, their breaths coming in harsh, uneven gasps. The footsteps were close now, almost on top of them. Lucy's heart raced as she listened, every muscle in her body tensed with fear. The footsteps slowed, and she could hear the voices of their pursuers, low and indistinct. They were searching, moving through the trees just a few feet away. Lucy held her breath, praying that they wouldn't be found. The seconds stretched into an eternity as they waited, the tension unbearable. Lucy could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic in her ears. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. And then, miraculously, the footsteps began to fade, moving away from their hiding spot. The voices grew fainter, and finally, the woods were silent once more. Jake didn't move for several long moments, his body still and tense beside her. When he finally relaxed, it was like a dam breaking, and Lucy let out a shaky breath, her body trembling with relief. "We lost them," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible in the darkness. Lucy nodded, unable to speak. She was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened. All she could do was lean against Jake, her body shaking with the aftereffects of fear. But even as they sat there in the darkness, safe for the moment, Lucy knew this wasn't over. The danger was still out there, lurking in the shadows. And she had a terrible feeling that it was only a matter of time before it found them again. Chapter 6. The Truth Beneath the Surface. The night wore on in tense silence, the forest around them thick with shadows and the lingering fear of being discovered. Lucy huddled close to Jake, her thoughts swirling with questions and doubts. Who were the people chasing them? What did they want? And how could she find Alex before it was too late? After what felt like hours, Jake finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "We can't stay here. They'll keep searching, and it's only a matter of time before they find us." Lucy nodded, her mind still foggy with exhaustion. "Where do we go?" "They'll be looking for us on the roads." Jake considered this for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "There's an old farmhouse about a mile from here, deeper in the woods. It's been abandoned for years, but it might be a good place to lay low for a while." "How do you know about it?" Lucy asked, surprised by this new revelation. Jake gave her a small, wry smile. "Alex and I used to go there when we were kids. It was our secret hideout. No one else knows about it." Lucy felt a pang of bittersweet nostalgia at the mention of Alex. The memories of their childhood seemed so distant now, overshadowed by the nightmare their lives had become. But the thought of a place where she might feel safe, even if only for a little while, was too tempting to resist. "Let's go," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "But we need to be careful." Jake nodded in agreement, and they both rose slowly, their muscles stiff from sitting so long in the cold. The woods were still eerily quiet as they set off, the path ahead barely visible in the darkness. Jake led the way, his steps sure and confident, as if he had walked this path 1,000 times before. Lucy followed close behind, her senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent her heart racing, but she forced herself to stay focused. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes now. As they walked, Lucy's mind drifted back to the locket in her pocket. The small, silver piece felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of the secrets she had yet to uncover. She pulled it out, running her fingers over the smooth surface, and a thought struck her. "Jake," she said quietly, breaking the silence. What if there's something hidden inside the locket? Something that could tell us where Alex is? Jake glanced back at her, his expression thoughtful. It's possible, but we need to be careful. If there's something inside, it could be dangerous. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Dangerous? How? He shook his head. I don't know, but we can't be sure of anything right now. They continued walking in silence, the locket clutched tightly in Lucy's hand. She didn't dare open it here, in the middle of the woods, with danger lurking around every corner. But as soon as they reached the farmhouse, she knew she would have to find out what it held. After what felt like an eternity, the trees began to thin, and a small, dilapidated farmhouse came into view. It was barely more than a shack, its roof sagging and the windows boarded up. But it was shelter, and right now, that was all they needed. Jake led her inside, the door creaking loudly as it swung open. The interior was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of decay. But it was dry, and the walls provided some measure of protection from the outside world. We'll stay here for now, Jake said, his voice low as he looked around. I don't think anyone will find us. Lucy nodded, her mind still focused on the locket. She sat down on the floor, her back against the wall, and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment she had been both dreading and anticipating. With trembling hands, she carefully opened the locket. Inside, instead of a photo or a trinket, there was a tiny, folded piece of paper. Lucy's breath caught in her throat as she pulled it out, her hands shaking. She unfolded the paper, revealing a hastily scrawled message. S. 51 degrees north, 0 degrees. It was a set of coordinates. Lucy stared at the numbers, her mind racing. What did they mean? Was this where Alex was hiding? Or was it a trap, something meant to lead her into even greater danger? Jake leaned over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing as he read the coordinates. This is somewhere in the middle of the woods, he said, his voice laced with suspicion. But it's not far from here. Maybe a couple of miles. Lucy felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. We have to go there, Jake. It could be where Alex is. Jake hesitated, clearly torn between caution and the need for answers. It's risky, Lucy. We don't know what we'll find. But we can't just sit here, she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. If there's even a chance that Alex is there, we have to take it. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, he said finally, his voice resigned. We'll go. But we have to be prepared for anything. Lucy nodded, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was it, the lead she had been waiting for, the chance to find Alex and uncover the truth. But as they prepared to set out, a deep sense of foreboding settled over her. The coordinates might lead them to Alex, or they might lead them straight into a trap. Either way, there was no turning back now. Chapter 7. The Last Step. The air was thick with tension as Lucy and Jake made their way through the dense woods, the coordinates from the locket guiding their every step. The night had given way to the first light of dawn, the sky tinged with the soft pinks and purples of early morning. But the beauty of the sunrise was lost on them. Every rustle in the underbrush, every shadow among the trees set their nerves on edge. Jake led the way, his eyes sharp and focused, scanning the path ahead. Lucy followed close behind, her mind racing with thoughts of what they might find. Was Alex really out here, hiding in these woods? Or was something far more sinister waiting for them at the coordinates? The tension between them was palpable, neither speaking as they moved swiftly through the forest. The sound of their footsteps seemed unnaturally loud in the silence, the woods eerily still as if holding its breath. Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but the thought of finding Alex, of ending this nightmare, drove her forward. After what felt like hours, Jake came to a sudden stop, holding up a hand to signal Lucy to be quiet. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest as he pointed ahead. Through the trees, she could just make out the outline of a small, dilapidated cabin. It was nearly hidden by the overgrowth, the wood weathered and dark, blending into the surrounding forest. That's it, Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. The coordinates lead here. Lucy's heart leaped into her throat. This was it, the place where the truth would finally be revealed. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever they might find inside. We have to be careful, Jake cautioned, his eyes scanning the area around the cabin. There could be someone watching. Lucy nodded, her pulse racing. She didn't need to be reminded of the danger. They were far beyond the point of no return. Together, they crept forward, moving silently through the underbrush, their senses on high alert. As they neared the cabin, Lucy could see that the door was slightly ajar, hanging loosely on its hinges. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone already been here? Or was Alex inside, waiting for them? Jake motioned for her to stay back as he approached the door, his hand resting on the hilt of the knife he had taken from the farmhouse. He pushed the door open with a soft creak, revealing the dark interior of the cabin. Lucy held her breath, her eyes straining to see into the shadows. The cabin was small, just one room, with a single, dusty window letting in a sliver of light. It was empty, save for a few pieces of broken furniture scattered across the floor. Jake stepped inside cautiously, his knife at the ready, while Lucy followed close behind. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rot and decay. But there was no sign of life, no indication that anyone had been here recently. Alex, Lucy called softly, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. There was no answer. The silence pressed in on her, suffocating in its intensity. Her heart sank, disappointment and dread mingling in her chest. Had they come all this way for nothing? Was Alex truly lost to her? But just as she was about to turn back, something caught her eye, a faint glint of metal in the corner of the room. She moved closer, her heart pounding, and saw a small trapdoor set into the floor, half hidden beneath a pile of debris. "Jake," she whispered urgently, pointing to the trapdoor. "Look." He hurried over, his eyes narrowing as he saw the metal handle. "It's a cellar door," he said, his voice low with suspicion. "Could be something, or someone, down there." Lucy's heart raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "We have to open it." Jake nodded, though his expression was wary. He crouched down, gripping the handle with both hands, and with a grunt of effort he pulled the door open. The hinges squealed in protest, and a cold, damp draft wafted up from below, carrying with it the scent of earth and mildew. A wooden ladder led down into the darkness, the bottom of which was swallowed by shadows. Lucy peered down, her stomach churning with anxiety. The cellar seemed to go deep underground, much deeper than she had expected. "I'll go first," Jake said, his voice firm. "Stay close behind me." Lucy nodded, swallowing her fear as she watched him descend the ladder, his footsteps echoing in the confined space. She followed, the wood creaking under her weight, every sound amplified in the tight quarters. As they reached the bottom, Lucy felt the damp earth beneath her feet, the cold seeping through her shoes. The cellar was small, with walls of packed dirt and a low ceiling that forced them to stoop. The only light came from a small, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And there, in the center of the room, was Alex. He was sitting on the ground, his back against the wall, his face pale and gaunt. His clothes were dirty and torn, his hair matted with grime. But despite his disheveled appearance, his eyes were sharp, filled with a mixture of relief and something else, fear. "Alex!" Lucy cried, rushing forward to kneel beside him. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took his hand, her heart breaking at the sight of him. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Alex gave her a weak smile, his voice hoarse as he spoke. "Lucy, you shouldn't have come." Tears streamed down her face as she gripped his hand tighter. I had to find you." Jake was standing a few feet away, his expression guarded as he watched them. "What happened, Alex? Who did this to you?" Alex's smile faded, and he glanced nervously at the ladder, as if expecting someone to come down at any moment. "They're after something I found. I don't know who they are, but they're dangerous, and they'll do anything to get it back." Lucy's heart pounded in her chest. "What did you find?" Alex hesitated, his eyes darting between Lucy and Jake. Then, with a sigh, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with dense, scrawled handwriting. "It's a journal," Alex explained, his voice trembling with emotion. "It belonged to my grandfather. He was involved in something. A conspiracy, a secret that people have killed to protect. I found it hidden in his old workshop, and ever since then, they've been hunting me." Lucy stared at the notebook, her mind reeling. A conspiracy? A secret worth killing for? It sounded impossible, but the fear in Alex's eyes told her it was all too real. "We have to leave," Jake said urgently, his eyes flicking back to the ladder. "They'll come for us, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Alex nodded weakly, struggling to his feet with Lucy's help. "But where can we go? They'll find us wherever we run." Lucy felt a surge of determination. "We'll find a way. We'll take the journal to the authorities, expose whatever this is. We'll make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Alex looked at her, his eyes filled with both hope and despair. "It's not that simple, Lucy. These people, they're powerful. They have connections, resources. If we go to the authorities, they'll just cover it up or worse. Then we go public," Jake interjected, his voice firm. "We take this story to the press, make sure everyone knows the truth. If enough people are watching, they won't be able to make us disappear." Lucy nodded, her resolve strengthening. "We'll do whatever it takes, Alex. We'll protect you." But before Alex could respond, a loud crash echoed from above, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps descending the ladder. They all froze, their hearts pounding with fear. The hunters had found them. Jake drew his knife, his face set in grim determination. "Get ready," he whispered to Lucy and Alex. "We're not going down without a fight." The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right above them. Lucy's breath caught in her throat as the first figure appeared at the top of the ladder, silhouetted against the faint light from the cabin above. But before they could react, the figure spoke, their voice cold and authoritative. "Drop the knife and no one gets hurt." Jake hesitated, his grip tightening on the hilt. But when the second figure stepped into view, leveling a gun at them, he had no choice. He dropped the knife, and it clattered to the ground. Lucy's heart pounded as the two men descended the ladder, their faces hidden in the shadows. They were dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, their eyes cold and hard. "Hand over the journal," one of the men demanded, his voice low and threatening. Alex held the notebook tightly to his chest, his hands trembling. "No," he said, his voice shaking with fear. "You can't have it." The man took a step forward, the gun aimed directly at Alex. "You don't have a choice." Lucy felt a surge of desperation. She couldn't let them take the journal, not after everything they had been through. But what could they do? They were outnumbered, outgunned, trapped in this tiny cellar with no way out. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jake move. It was a subtle shift, barely noticeable, but she recognized the tension in his body, the readiness in his stance. He was preparing to strike. The man with the gun took another step forward, his attention focused on Alex and the journal. And in that split second, Jake made his move. He lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground, the gun going off with a deafening bang. Chaos erupted. The other man lunged at Jake, but Lucy was faster. She grabbed the knife from the ground and plunged it into the attacker's side, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The man let out a grunt of pain, stumbling backward, and Jake delivered a swift kick, knocking him to the floor. But the first man wasn't down. He struggled with Jake, the gun clattering across the floor. Lucy's heart raced as she grabbed the weapon, her hands shaking as she aimed it at the man's head. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice trembling with fear and determination. "Don't move or I'll shoot." The man froze, his eyes narrowing as he glared at her. But he didn't move, his hands slowly rising in surrender. Jake scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He grabbed the journal from Alex and held it up, his voice steady and defiant. "This ends here. We're taking this to the press, to the public. You can't stop us." The man's eyes flicked to the journal, then back to Jake. There was a flicker of something in his expression. Fear, perhaps, or defeat. But before he could respond, Lucy felt a sudden, sharp pain in her side, and the world tilted dangerously. She had been stabbed. Lucy stumbled backward, the gun slipping from her grasp as she fell to the ground. The pain was overwhelming, her vision blurring as she gasped for breath. She could hear Jake shouting, but his words were distant, muffled, as if they were coming from underwater. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Alex, his face pale with terror as he reached for her. And then, everything went black. The sound of beeping pulled Lucy from the darkness, a steady, rhythmic tone that grew louder with each passing second. She blinked her eyes open, her vision blurry, and slowly became aware of her surroundings. She was in a hospital room, the sterile white walls and the scent of antiseptic unmistakable. The beeping came from the heart monitor beside her bed, its display flashing with each beat of her heart. Pain radiated from her side, a dull, throbbing ache that made it difficult to move. But she was alive. She had survived. As she tried to sit up, a soft voice spoke from beside her. "Take it easy, Lucy. You're safe now." She turned her head and saw Alex sitting in a chair by her bed, his face gaunt but filled with relief. His hand reached out to take hers, his grip warm and steady. "Alex," she whispered, her voice weak. What happened?" He smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "We made it out, Lucy. The authorities found us before they could do more harm." Lucy's heart ached with relief and gratitude. They had survived. They were safe. But at what cost? "And the journal?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Alex's expression darkened slightly. "It's with the authorities now. They're investigating, but it's complicated. Those people, they have connections, power. But we've done everything we can. The truth will come out." Tears welled up in Lucy's eyes, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear. She squeezed Alex's hand tightly, grounding herself in the reality that they were both alive, that they had survived the nightmare. "I'm just glad you're okay," Alex said softly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I thought I'd lost you." Lucy smiled weakly, her heart swelling with warmth. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." But even as she spoke, a shadow of doubt lingered in her mind. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. There were still forces out there, dark and powerful, that would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. And Lucy knew that she, Alex, and Jake were now part of something much larger, something that would require courage, strength, and unwavering determination to face. But for now, they were safe. They had each other. And that was enough. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.